Hello, and welcome to this video lecture on website development and design. So we've got a lot of things to cover today, and so some things that you should learn after watching this video and reading your chapter include thinking about a website design from the perspective of usability. Also think about how visible your site is from a search engine and how to become visible to that search engine. We'll also look at how web design can affect your website performance, and then what goes into a successful landing page. And so a landing page is where the user actually comes into your site. Now, a lot of times you might think that's your home page or the page that's named index.html. But if they're doing a search and for some reason your site has been indexed by a search engine, they may come in on any page that search engine returned and they may click on. And so you need to be careful about how the user's coming into your site and what their first impressions are when they come into your site. But we'll go ahead and get started and cover that later on. Now, for our definition, usability is going to be how your website's ability is to accomplish the goals of the user. Sometimes you'll hear usability mentioned as how accessible it is for people with handicaps or meeting some government guidelines for those people who need extra help. So there might be some 504 guidelines. But in our case, this is how we're referring to usability. So when you think of that, that means all the standard features that you would normally see, such as your links, your menus, the colors are not all over the place. There's not a whole bunch of different colors like a rainbow on your site. Your layout is distinct and can be easily recognized by users. So that's some form of branding, if you will. And so your information architecture or the layout and structure of your site is critical to the usability. If you don't have a well laid out site, people aren't going to be able to navigate to where they need to go and find the information that they were sent to your site for to look for. Then they're going to leave right away and you're going to lose out on what your intention was to drive that user to your site. So in order to show the user how they can get around on your site, it might be a good idea to have a site map. And a site map should be available on every page. And from there you would show the architecture of your site. So the user would know, if I click here, where am I going to go? And so I think if you look on Blackboard, you're going to see a site map that shows that usability of that site. So with that site map, the key thing is the navigation. The navigation guides the user from the level they're on now to lower levels. And so think about it, it's a link from one page, from that page you can get to another page and so on. The idea is that you never want your navigation levels to be probably more than 3 levels deep. I think previous research has found that if it is, then users tend to get lost, and once they're lost and can't find their way back, they'll just leave and probably never return again. And here we have accessibility, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people use or interchange usability, accessibility, but we're going to make the distinction here that accessibility is the degree into which the website is available to users with disabilities or some sort of technical limitation. Maybe they have a hard time moving a mouse, sometimes they can't read the screen, they have screen readers for them, those sort of things. And so you also need to keep that in mind when you're designing your website and coming out with a nice structure that these readers and when I say readers, they're special browsers that can read the text or content back to the users that are using those. Some key points about accessibility is that you want to make sure that your website looks the same on a variety of different browsers. In the past, when I've taught website design, I would tell you, the students that they probably need to check their website on Chrome, Firefox, Safari. Those are the three major ones, and make sure that it looks presentable, that there's no major glitches, and how that appears on the screen. You also, as you're doing that, make sure that it's functional to users that might have a disability. Also think about the bandwidth that users are going to have when they're accessing your site. And what I mean by bandwidth is the speed in which they can deliver IP packets back and forth. So the speed in which they can upload or download a file. And so if it's high speed, then you can have larger files. And what I mean by larger files is content in terms of some form of multimedia, whether it's a video or it's a picture. And if they have low bandwidth, then you're going to have to reduce that video down. You're going to have to reduce that audio down. Also shrink those pictures down. Maybe it won't look as crisp, but they'll still be able to get the information and not have to wait a long time in order to get that. You also want to have a search box that can be used to search your website. There's techniques for that in terms of you can use Google to search your site, and you just put some code behind that so that when you throw the search box up on the screen, you're actually using Google and you're limiting it just to your website or URL, and then it can return results that looks like the search engine's just for your website and you built it on your website, when in fact you're just using the Google search engine. When you look at the content that you're writing for your web page, you need to make sure that it is concise. It's got the information that users are looking for, and so that's usually related to the title of the web page. And so it's usually small paragraphs, 50 words or less, bulleted items. So you want to have that so they can just scan it and see exactly what they want. You also want to avoid long paragraphs. They tend to be very dry and people don't want to scan those. So again, break up the paragraphs into smaller paragraphs. Use some headings if you would, maybe even some subheadings so that people can even move directly to what they're looking for. Some things you should avoid when you're designing your website is you never want to have it come up in a pop-up window, and that's usually a window that pops up on another window and it's smaller in size. You don't want to use a splash screen. A splash screen is usually what you might have if you have an app and the initial screen is just the name of the app and then it goes into the actual applications. You want to avoid building things with Flash. Flash has some security issues. They're always coming out with updates. And in fact, HTML5 actually was designed so it would avoid particular video type files like Flash because of the security problems, and that you have no control and you can't really monitor where the user is in that video and capture what they're doing with that video. So HTML5 actually has elements or little tags that have actually say video and audio, and you can put things in there. The last thing that it talks about is you want to avoid things like Christmas trees. These are the flashing lights, changing colors, or sound that automatically pops up. And they tend to just distract the user, and it makes it very annoying, and then the user will just move on and not engage with your site. The next thing you want to consider after you've thought about usability is your search engine visibility. So that's what we'll talk about next. So when we talk about search engine visibility, you want to make sure that all your URLs are working, that you'd have no broken links. So URL is a uniform resource locator, and that's just the address that goes in a website. If you have any images then you want to make sure their alt tags are there, and the alt tags go along with an image so that if somebody's disabled, they would actually see what the content of that image would be. Make sure you have a title tag, that is the web page has a title, and that you've got any metadata within your head section to be correct. And I'm going to show you the SM web page, and hopefully I explain some of these things so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So here's the SM website. If I do a right click on this, I can go to view page source. And so here's the page source. We know that it's written in HTML5. We see here the meta tags. Here are the keywords if somebody had put in this information in there. Also a description of the site. So if I wanted a higher search engine ranking, I would put things in there that were about that first page, and that information would be there. And then also within the head tag, and this part you don't see on the screen other than, let me find it here. I'm looking for the title tag, and that's usually on every web page. There it is, just as big as plain as day. So this title page, this title that you see here, this is what gets displayed on the actual tab at the top. And so you want to have a title that's representative of this content below. So all this content should have the same or be related to the title here. If it isn't, when the web search engine comes in and evaluates your site with a bot of some type, if it doesn't make a match, then you're going to get a lower search engine ranking. And so that's what we're talking about inside of this area here. So the way you lay things out is going to be important, but more important is that they all match up. You also want to avoid having multiple URLs for the same page there. If you have multiple URLs, then chances are you're going to dilute the ranking, because I think maybe you're trying to fool the search engine bot, and so you may get a lower ranking from that. My suggestion, though, is if you do build a website and you're thinking about this development and design for your website, you need to go and look at the search engine to see what their guides are in terms of how to get a higher ranking visibility in the results of the search page. Alright, so if you don't want a page listed or evaluated by the search engine, you can put in a text file, right, that restricts the search engine spider from crawling and indexing your page there. You just have to tell it that, and that will keep that from being a landing page in the search engine results. So I'm going to show you what I mean by search engine results. So I went to Google, I typed in systems management, and this is what came up. So this is a paid search result, and down here below are the organic search results. And you can see how they're getting a higher listing. We may have to go. So there we are. So we're listed on probably the first page of different systems management results, which is a good thing. And we could do things that would help us move up in terms of this organic result page. Some other things you can do before you release your website is you want to make sure you check for broken links. And there are programs that are out on the web that you can go and submit your website to. It'll check everything and give you a report back to tell you where the broken links are. There are also applications that will validate your HTML and your CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. We'll show you more about that here in a second. You want to make sure that all your forms and applications work as they're written to or at least suggested to your end users. And you want to try and keep your file sizes for your pictures, your audio, and your video as small as possible. All right, and you then want to look and see, okay, what's the entire size of my page? So you want to try and keep that to about 150 KB per kilobytes. Another thing to consider is when you're designing your website, you have to think about, why are you doing this? So to me, the question of why is always the important one. And you think, is it for a sale? Is it to generate a lead? Is it to generate them to sign up for something? Or is it for the user to come in and download something? So what we're thinking about in terms of goals is think about it as a conversion. So that's the terminology that's used. And so a user comes into your site. What is it that you want the user to do? And so you want to convert them, and we can watch or actually track what the user's doing and where they're going on your website. So think about why you're doing something. Some other things you need to keep in mind is where you're going to put things on your website. So notice here it says place phone numbers and addresses above the fold. So that's an old marketing term, an old, if you're using newspaper term. Above the fold means when you fold a newspaper, that's there on that front page. You know, a lot of people won't look below the fold. And so in terms of website design, it means as soon as that page loads, it's on that portion of the window. You don't want to have the user scroll down to find some other content. So try and put this information there, because chances are they're coming there looking for this phone number or address. You also want to put something in there that's personal, maybe an About Us page that gives the information that the person might be also looking for. Another way to market your site is to give testimonials on each page, especially if it's for a sale or a product or a service. Use logos, so you want to have those designed before you ever do your website. You want to be able to link to other sites that will link back to yours. That search engine, when it sees those links, will follow those links and see if that's happening, and also see how many sites are linking to yours, and that gives you more credibility and a higher result in that search engine results page. And so that search engine results page is SERP. You'll see that in your book. You also want to keep your content fresh and updated. So every so often, it just depends on how quickly you need that. But if somebody comes to your site and then a month later they come back to your site and nothing's changed, they're gonna get the impression that it's not being updated, not looked after, and so they may not place a high quality on your content and think that it's fresh and new. And so they might not come back again. And so you want to make sure there's no errors on your site. Again, you'll run some kind of validator application on your HTML code, and then same thing with your cascading style sheets or the CSS information. All right. And depending on what you're selling or what your conversion is, you might want to put some past work out there as well. So what I've got listed on the screen here is a link to the cascading style sheet that's used to format this particular page, the systems management page. So if we look at that, you'll see that it's got certain information there. And I'm not going to explain all this because this isn't an HTML class, but this is what we mean by having all of this validated and all of this working. You don't want to have things in there that the search engine bot or crawler finds mistakes with and it's not working, and that would give you a lower ranking as well. So what that CSS does then, it controls the colors, the topography, where things are laid out on the screen. It just doesn't wrap like a regular text editor. If you didn't have CSS to do that, then that's what would happen. It would just wrap as you got to the next line, fill up with whatever you're putting there, whether that's pictures or big fonts, little fonts, those sort of things. And so what you're doing using CSS is you're separating out your content from your formatting. And so you can just concentrate on putting your content on the screen, and then you come back and format it later. Right? And what that does for you then is it makes your site easier to maintain and update. And then whoever's doing that update, they're just looking at the content. They don't need to be a web designer or a developer in order to do that. Right? Also, that CSS file that we had, if you're a large website, then you can use that file and apply it to all your other web pages, and so it gives it the same look and feel. And so then if I need to change, say, a background color of a certain element, if I change it in that CSS file, then all the HTML files will have that change done automatically. So that's what it's talking about here in terms of global changes can be applied more quickly and easily. CSS can also, because it's separated differently, reduce the bandwidth and page loading times. So now you're not having to have all that formatting code in each page, so that reduces the size of the page that gets sent down. So the CSS file only gets sent to the client or the browser once. And hopefully that also increases the compatibility across browsers because they'll all understand the CSS. And if they don't, then you can go into your CSS and do things so that it would understand it, and then it would hopefully look very similar, if not identical, on every type of browser, whether it's Firefox, Chrome, or Safari. Now you can also use things like a content management system. So CMS would be an example. So it can be built specifically for a website, and web development companies use those. In fact, we use something called OU Campus. That's what you were seeing. And so it is a content management system. You may be more familiar with something like WordPress. That is a content management system where you have templates and all you have to do is provide the content. But there's lots and lots of CMS systems out there, and so you need to choose one that has the different functionality that you want for your website and what you're planning on doing for your website. So some things to look for then is some kind of meta and title tag customization you can do. Any HTML tag customization, you don't want to just be limited to the basic HTML tags. Does it handle your links correctly? Is there some kind of customizable navigation, or are you just stuck with the template they give you? Can you customize the image naming, do all the alt tags for the images? Does it allow you to place this text file in your web pages so that it knows not to index those in the search engine? And will it do some kind of content search so that when you're trying to update something, you can actually find it quickly? I did a quick search of content management systems just to show you what's out there. We have open source software, means that it's free and you can download it and use it. The support might be a little lacking, but you never know. There might be great support, but you're going to have to go onto the web to probably find it. So here's some examples that were written in Java. Different bundles. You can use Microsoft ASP.NET. So that's sort of customized. Here's some different CMSs that make use of that. There's some that were written in Perl, some that were written in PHP, a lot that were written in PHP. So you can see actually here's WordPress. They're written in PHP. They actually tell you what databases they support. So a lot of the content stored in a database, and when the page loads, it goes to the database and pulls the content into the area that it needs. Here's some that are written in Python, some that support Ruby on Rails, some Cold Fusion language ones, and so on. I know this probably doesn't mean a lot to many of you, but there are a host of content management systems out there that you could use that come with templates and then you can just plug in your content into those templates. I'm going to pause here and try and find maybe a WordPress template that you can see. So I typed in WordPress themes. That's what the templates are called. It's a theme for your website. And so you can come down here and see these are the different themes. So this called Superstore, Mino, so on. Maybe you want a site that looks like this, so on. So they even supply the images, if you will. Right, you can find all kinds of themes. You can still use WordPress, which is free, but then you can use their free themes or go out and find other free themes, or you can actually buy themes that people have designed to use with WordPress. And this would be the same for most content management systems. So specifically, some things to consider is whether it's proprietary or open source. Depends on where you're going to find your service for that or support for that. I mean, if it's open source, you may not be able to find much support, or it might be shoddy, large gaps in between time when you're requesting help. If it's proprietary and you're paying for it, you're probably going to pay for that support as well. Can you rewrite your existing URL? Maybe you want a shorthand URL. Does it do any kind of compression that helps speed up the download times? What kind of compressions you use? gzip is one. Is there any kind of validation? That is, if you're doing forms, do you want to make sure that people pipe in the right information, the right kind of information in those forms? Or does that validation need to be processed? If it's for credit card, you definitely want it to be on the server side. You don't want it to be processed on the client side, because people that are a little shady could do something to make it seem like the credit card was approved and it's good to go. So you always want to do that kind of validation on the server side. Some other things to make sure you look at, and this is fairly standard now, is that it uses international character or the UTF-8 encoding, which most browsers, I would say all browsers support now, the new ones. It has search-friendly sessions that can be used within those content management systems. Will it help you generate sitemaps, which we talked about earlier on? Do you have XML, extensible markup language sitemaps that can be used in other areas outside of the content management system? And does it have the ability to do any RSS feeds so that you can get your information out there and people can link to it? So we talked about this early on. You need to think about which of those pages in your website are going to be landing pages. It could be more than just your home page, but those are the pages that come up in your searching when you're on a search engine like Google. And so what did they use to type in, so you can track what they're typing in? But those are also some of the things you need to think about in terms of your keywords that you use, and actually specify in your web pages so that they come up in that search engines. So think about why they're coming to your site. If they've got, to enter some kind of competition or buy a product or to subscribe to something, then those are the pages you want them to land on. And make sure those pages have exactly what the user is looking for. So a key component here on this slide is that you want to design it so that the user will continue on with the conversion that you want them to do. That is, they're going to complete the desired action, whether it's sign up for something, download something, complete a sale, so on, have them buy something. So make sure that landing page enables the user to do that. You don't want to make it cumbersome and hard to complete. So finally, some guidelines for successful landing pages is that they need to be purposely built. Right? Make sure that you know why people are going to land on this page. Right? So you want to keep people on that path, that conversion, and then you make use of this text file where you're telling the search engine spider, crawler, bot not to use this landing page, and so then that won't come up in a search engine result. And that ends this chapter on website development and design.